Mr. Naidoo, thank you so much for joining us. You've spent some time at the Cosatu conference. Prior to this conference, there was a lot of talk about the fact that the Federation is in fact at the crossroads, that it needs to decide or make a tough choice between focusing on the needs of its constituency, which are workers, or get involved in the politics of the ANC. Is it as cut and dried as that for you?
No, I don't think so, because politics has such a huge impact on what happens on the shop floor. In fact, Zwelinzima Vavi captured it well in saying that the Cosatu needs to go beyond Polokwane and Mangaung to the issues that affect workers on the ground and to connect with them, because there has been a social distance that has arisen between the leadership, not just in the trade union movement, but across the political spectrum and in civil society, with the grassroots constituencies who are facing increasing challenges of poverty, of inequality, of joblessness. This is a very difficult time for ordinary people, not just in South Africa, but throughout the world. You're sitting in Europe amongst educated people, young people with over 50 to 60% unemployment. The nature of work organization is changing. The nature of what will be formal jobs will be changing as the economies shrink. And so there are many challenges that face Cosatu, but you cannot separate politics from it.
Okay, now let's talk about that changing world of the world of work. We see in South Africa the consequences of atypical work, the use of subcontractors, the way in which unions are organized at the moment. Are they geared toward dealing with the realities in this changing world of work?
Well, I think one thing is that they need to come to terms with the issue that the workplace organization has changed. But secondly, workplace organization has also been changed by many unscrupulous employers to break down and undermine the collective bargaining system. Now, if we succeed in doing that, what will happen is what happened at Marikana, because there's no cohesion, there's no legitimate collective bargaining system that operates in the platinum industry that is able to channel the grievances or the aspirations or the hopes of mine workers into a bargaining negotiation. I think beyond that is the fact that employers, particularly in the mining industry, have sheltered themselves from the social environment from which these workers come, and the growth of really squalid conditions under which many of these workers live in slums and informal townships. Yet there is a commitment on them in terms of the leases that they've got to operate their mines in terms of a social plan or the mining charter. I think this is a wake-up call for us, that we cannot separate the issues of the factory floor from what's happening in our community there. Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, in fact, the largest affiliate of Cosatu is the National Union of Mine Workers. They have come in for a lot of criticism, argued by detractors of the union, saying that they've lost touch with the ground. The lower skilled workers are not, in fact, supportive of what NUM is doing. There's not enough servicing of workers. To what extent is that true? And secondly, is Cosatu in a position to address that, given the fact that there's such fierce competition for membership, in the mining sector?
Well, I think those issues are certainly on the agenda. The good thing about the leadership being elected unanimously, it's allowed them to focus on what are the real issues that affect us here in South Africa. And one of the issues is that, yes, the lowest paid workers in our country have been left behind, largely because of across-the-board increases, have not instituted the type of increases for lower workers that it has for higher workers. And this was mentioned by Vavi in his report, that in a sense, workers feel they are disconnected even from the negotiating process. So yes, these are challenges that face them. I think the survey that Cosatu has done is very valuable in terms of reorientating the leadership towards the central issues affecting workers in this country, and the fact that with the massive job losses as a result of the economic crisis, where over 1 million jobs were lost, in addition to the fact that we did not address the structural unemployment in our country, which leaves probably 60% of young people coming into the labor market with no jobs, very little skills, and unlikely to have a job in their lifetime. We are in a volatile situation if we do not address that time bomb. And we have to do it in a way that looks at the type of jobs we are going to create, what the bargaining process is going to be, how do we look at the investment into the productive sector that creates jobs.
Now, one of the successes that Cosatu counts, and that Mr. Vavi drew attention to when he was delivering his political report, is that Cosatu has been able to influence economic policy direction. He mentioned, for example, the IPAP 2, the new growth path, the fact that the Labour Federation is consulted. You were a former Cosatu General Secretary. You served in Cabinet as a Cabinet Minister. What happens, Mr. Naidoo, when Cosatu deploys its senior leadership to government to help take forward those policy positions of organised labour? Because as it stands, it seems as if once people leave the trade union movement and they go into government, they are unable to take forward the policy positions of the Federation. Is the reality of governance something that is a bit of a wake-up call for Cosatu members who go into government, and do they find it very difficult there?
I think there's a very fundamental assumption we've got to make. When I left as General Secretary of Cosatu to go into the Parliament on an ANC ticket, I was representing the ANC. And when I get appointed as a minister, I'm a minister responsible to and accountable to the ANC. And so we carry with us the value system. But a cabinet operates as a collective, driven by a president. The real power, and that's where we have failed to achieve any consensus on, in terms of policy making, should have been the tripartite alliance, which brings the ANC and Cosatu together. But in everything that Vavi has said, and what I know, that alliance has not performed, it's not been functional. It has not influenced the policy direction of this country. And so if one looks at the policy direction in the country, the choices we made, whether that's around black economic empowerment, or whether that's about gear, whether that's about the continually new reinvention of policy frameworks and the closure of the RDP, we come back to the same issue, is that policy is not driven by an alliance. And largely the views of Cosatu have in the past been ignored.
But the ANC is a multi-class organization. It's not a trade union movement.
Sure, I agree.
To what extent is there an acceptance on the part of organised labour that they are of the many voices that seek to influence direction in terms of policy when it comes to what government does? And isn't there an inherent push-pull tension in that relationship, given how broad the ANC actually is?
Oh, absolutely. But you cannot compare Cosatu with over 2 million members to a hockey club. This is the anchor of our democracy in this country. Any attempts to undermine the collective bargaining mechanism set up in the Labour Relations Act to undermine Cosatu undermines democracy in our country. And sure, they are one of many voices, but there's a weight given to the voices. And I think at the end of the day, there's a recognition in the tripartite alliance, the one that I led Cosatu into, that we face a triple burden of poverty, of growing inequality, and of structural unemployment. And today you can add a fourth pillar to that, which is the growing corruption that has become endemic in our society. So in a situation like that, we have to ask ourselves the question, not just as institutions and organizations like Cosatu or the ANC or the SACP, but as citizens. What are we going to do as citizens to ensure that the state delivers on the mandate we promised our people in 1994, which was a better quality of life? Schools, they're not just the construction of schools, but the delivery of quality education, of medicines into our clinics, of the type of housing that does not collapse because a shoddy contractor has been given a tender by a pal in the council. These are issues that affect every single one of us as citizens. So the issues that Cosatu raised, and particularly the issues that Vavi raised, are critical issues that should be steering the public debate in our country, not the question of succession. It is the substantive issues that he has raised that reflect a growing crisis in our country, and we have to be blind to not see the crisis in our country.
Mr. Naidoo, thank you so much. Obviously, lots still to talk about there. The former founding General Secretary of Cosatu talking to us there about the role of the South African Congress of Trade Unions within the broader alliance.